I didn't panic when my brother's voice drifted in from the living room and said, "Hey, I used your card for candy." I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones after a full day of work and a quiet check on your sleeping child. Candy is nothing. A couple of dollars. I told myself I'd look at it later. Later came around midnight. The house was silent when I opened my banking app. No TV noise. No footsteps. Just the soft glow of my phone and the familiar comfort of seeing my balances lined up the way they were supposed to be. Except they weren't. Candy wasn't candy. It was concert tickets, gaming equipment, designer clothes, a festival deposit I had never booked. I scrolled, then scrolled again, my thumb moving slower with each transaction. In less than a week, $8,400 was gone. Not slowly, not accidentally, deliberately. That money had a job. It was meant for my son's medical bills, the prescriptions insurance never fully covered. It was meant for the car repair I'd been postponing every time the engine rattled a little louder. It was the thin line between stability and chaos. My chest didn't tighten. It went quiet. I called my mom, hand steady, voice not quite. I read her the numbers, the dates, the total. I waited for her to say this was wrong, that it was serious, that we needed to fix it. She laughed. Not cruelly. Casually. "Jordan," she said, "kids will be kids." Something in me shifted then. Not anger. Not shock. Understanding. No one was coming to stop this. No one was going to protect my son. No one was going to protect me. So I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I hung up, set my phone face down, and opened my laptop. I froze my cards. Locked accounts. Changed passwords. Logged out of every shared device. I followed the email confirmations and canceled what I could, flagged what I couldn't, and closed every door they'd been walking through without asking. By 2:10 a.m. the money wasn't fully back, but the damage was contained. I lay there afterward, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe, knowing that when morning came, the people who thought kids will be kids was an excuse were about to learn what it felt like when access disappeared. By morning they realized what I'd done, and they did not take it quietly. It all started a few months earlier. Ryan called me from a parking lot in another state, his voice heavy and broken in a way I wasn't used to. He'd been laid off from a logistics job he thought he'd retire from. Rent had fallen behind, bills were stacking up, and the landlord had finally said, "Enough is enough. Just for a few weeks," he said. "Until I get back on my feet." I didn't even do the math. I looked at my 3-bedroom place in Denver, saw the empty room I'd been using as a home office, and said yes. I moved my son, Ethan, into my room, shoved my desk into a corner, and opened the door to them. Ryan, his wife Megan, their 19-year-old son Tyler. First it felt kind of nice. The house was fuller, louder. Ryan joked in the kitchen. Megan talked about all the things she was about to start. Tyler sprawled on the couch, phone in hand, music humming, scrolling endlessly. I worked in risk and compliance at a health insurance company. I spent all day thinking about what could go wrong if rules are ignored. But at home I ignored every red flag. The bills exploded. Groceries doubled, then tripled. The power climbed because someone always had the AC blasting or the TV on in every room. Takeout containers stacked up because no one felt like cooking. I was the one swiping my card, telling myself it was temporary. Ethan stopped asking if we could drive out of town on weekends because he knew I'd be working overtime. He lost his room, his quiet, and a little piece of his mom. Also, I could tell myself I was doing the right thing. I kept meticulous track of everything. Every paycheck divided into neat buckets. Mortgage, utilities, Ethan's soccer fees, a tiny emergency fund for the medical stuff I didn't want to think about, and the car that rattled every time I hit the freeway. But there were extras. Always extras. DoorDash runs. Streaming subscriptions no one watched but no one turned off. Bus passes and gas money that never seemed to lead anywhere. I tried gently mentioning it, hinting at the stress it caused. Ryan would wrap an arm around me and say, "You're overthinking it. Once I land the right position, I'll pay you back." Megan would talk about selling things online or starting a side hustle. But somehow their day always ended on the couch with a show and a glass of wine. Tyler didn't even pretend. He slept late, played games, watched influencers flex vacations in sneakers, and treated my living room like a stage. By the time that candy comment turned into the $8,400 in unauthorized charges, the truth was ugly but simple. I hadn't just given them a place to stay. I'd given them my boundaries, my finances, and my peace. And they'd taken all of it. Backhand index pointing right, and the more I paid, the more entitled they became. By the time I understood what was happening, it already felt normal. That's the part that still bothers me. I had always been careful with money. Not obsessive, just intentional. Every dollar had a place. Rent, food, gas, medical, emergency. I kept separate budget buckets in my head because that was the only way I could make one income stretch far enough for two people. But once my brother and his family moved in, those buckets started leaking. First it was small things. Extra groceries. A higher water bill. The electricity bill creeping up month after month. Ryan would notice and say, "I'll get you back." Like it was a formality. Like the words themselves were payment enough. I told myself he meant it. Megan always had something going on. Some hustle. Some idea. Some almost their opportunity that never quite turned into real money. She talked a lot about potential, about plans, about how things were going to change soon. They never did. Tyler didn't even pretend. He slept late, stayed up later, and treated the house like a hotel he hadn't paid for but expected full service from. He ate what he wanted, used whatever he wanted, and never once asked if something was okay. Somewhere along the way, asking disappeared altogether. Packages started arriving that weren't mine. Shoes, headphones, clothes still wrapped in plastic. I'd see them stacked by the door and assume they'd used their own money. I didn't check. I didn't want to be that person. Every time I felt the urge to question something, I reminded myself that family helps family. That this was temporary. That things would balance out eventually. But they didn't balance. They tilted. More expenses showed up and somehow they were always mine. More meals. More gas. More everything. When I mentioned it, Ryan would sigh and say things like, "You know we're struggling." Or, "We're all under the same roof." And I'd back down. Every time. Ethan noticed before I did. He stopped asking for friends to come over. He kept his things closer. He learned to share space he'd never agreed to give up. His room, the one place that had been his, was gone and he never complained. That hurt more than the bills. I told myself I was being strong. What I was really doing was making it easy. Looking back, I see it clearly now. I didn't just give them shelter. I gave them access. To my home. To my routines. To my trust. And eventually to my money. The tone shifted without warning. Requests turned into expectations. Gratitude turned into irritation when I hesitated. The more I covered, the more they assumed I would. Like it was owed. One afternoon, Tyler laughed when I mentioned how tight things were getting. He didn't even look up from his phone. "You're always worried," he said. "You've got it." That sentence landed heavier than he realized. Because in that moment, I understood something I'd been avoiding. They didn't see sacrifice. They saw supply. And once someone decides you're a resource instead of a person, they stop asking where the line is. They just keep taking. And then one lazy sentence exposed everything. I waited until the house was quiet. No TV noise. No footsteps. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of someone scrolling on a phone down the hall. I didn't want an audience. I didn't want drama. I just wanted answers. Ryan was sitting on the edge of the bed when I knocked. He looked tired but not surprised. That alone told me more than I wanted to know. I stayed calm. I remember that clearly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him. I simply held out my phone and said, "I need you to look at something." He barely glanced at the screen. "These are the charges from my card," I said, scrolling slowly so he could see the dates, the amounts, the names of the places. "They're not mistakes. They weren't emergencies. And they weren't approved." He sighed, rubbed his face, and leaned back like this was an inconvenience. "That's fraud," he said flatly. "Someone must have stolen your information." I stared at him. "Ryan," I said carefully, "the charges are tied to accounts in this house." He shrugged. Then he said it. The sentence that drained the room of whatever respect was left. "He's just a kid. Just a kid." As if that erased intent. As if thousands of dollars could disappear under that excuse. As if my son's medical bills meant less than a festival weekend and a new gaming setup. I told him what that money was for. I explained it slowly, clearly, like facts might still matter. I talked about prescriptions, about the car, about how close I'd been walking to the edge without saying a word. He didn't interrupt. He also didn't apologize. Instead, he looked past me toward the hallway and said, "You're blowing this out of proportion." Something cracked inside my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "I need this fixed," I said. "Now." That's when he stood up, walked past me and closed the door. Just like that. No discussion. No responsibility. Just a solid, quiet click that said the conversation was over. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at the door, listening to my own breathing, waiting for anyone to reopen it and say this had gone too far. No one did. That was when it hit me. I wasn't a sister. I wasn't family. I was an account. A shared resource they felt entitled to access whenever it suited them. I walked back to my room without making a sound, sat on the edge of the bed, looked at my hands. They were shaking now, but not from fear. From clarity. I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit before. Asking politely wasn't going to fix this. Explaining myself wasn't going to fix this. Waiting for accountability wasn't going to fix this. Because they didn't think they'd done anything wrong. And when someone believes that, they don't stop on their own. That was the moment I stopped asking permission and started taking control. I didn't storm through the house. I didn't wake anyone up. I didn't announce what I was about to do. I waited until everyone was asleep. The clock on my phone read 1:37 a.m. The house felt heavier than usual, like it was holding its breath. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and my phone beside it, already logged into my bank. This time there was no hesitation. I froze every card connected to my name, one by one. The physical card, the digital wallet, the backups I'd forgotten existed until that night. Each confirmation felt like tightening a lock I should have installed a long time ago. Then I moved on to the apps. Food delivery first. I logged in and removed my card completely, changed the password, logged out of every device that wasn't mine. The same routine over and over until it became automatic. Shopping apps came next. The ones with one-click checkout. The ones that made it too easy to spend money that wasn't theirs. I removed saved payments, revoked permissions, and reset everything. Streaming services, ride shares, even subscriptions I barely remembered signing up for. If my card had ever touched it, it was getting shut down. There was something strangely calming about the process. Not satisfying. Not revenge. Just control. Every email confirmation landed in my inbox like proof that I wasn't imagining things. That I wasn't overreacting. That what I was doing made sense. I canceled what I could. Some tickets were refundable. Some weren't. I flagged the rest as fraud and documented everything carefully. Dates. Times. Screenshots. I wasn't emotional about it anymore. I was precise. At one point I paused and listened. The house was still quiet. No doors opening. No voices. No footsteps rushing down the hallway. They had no idea yet. That part mattered. Because for the first time since they moved in, I was acting without being interrupted, dismissed, or talked over. By 2:10 a.m. the damage had stopped. The money wasn't fully recovered. I knew it wouldn't be that simple. But nothing else was leaving my account. No more silent withdrawals. No more surprises. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. My hands finally stopped shaking. The house felt different now. Quieter. Not just physically but emotionally. Like something invisible had shifted out of place and wasn't going back. I thought about my son asleep down the hall. About how carefully I'd tried to keep things peaceful for him. About how much I'd absorbed so he wouldn't have to. And I realized something uncomfortable. Protecting him meant disappointing them. I went to bed just before 3, knowing sleep wouldn't come easily. And it didn't. I lay there listening to the familiar sounds of the house, knowing that by morning, those sounds would be replaced by something else. Confusion. Anger. Panic. Because when people lose access to something they feel entitled to, they don't ask politely what happened. They demand it back. And I knew without a doubt that the next day wasn't going to be quiet. The first sound I heard that morning wasn't yelling. It was confusion. A drawer slammed shut. Then another. Footsteps moved too quickly across the kitchen floor, followed by the sharp tap of someone aggressively pressing buttons on a phone screen. Then the voices started. Why isn't it going through? That doesn't make any sense. Try it again. I stayed in my room a few minutes longer. Long enough to let reality settle in. Long enough to make sure I was calm. By the time I walked into the kitchen, all of them were there. Ryan stood by the counter, his phone in his hand, jaw tight. Megan was pacing, muttering under her breath. Tyler was at the table, tapping his card against the surface like it might magically start working again. No one looked at me at first. Then Ryan did. "What did you do?" he asked. His tone wasn't curious. It wasn't concerned. It was irritated. Like I changed a password on a shared Wi-Fi network without warning. I set my coffee down and leaned against the counter. "I stopped the theft," I said. Silence dropped into the room, heavy and immediate. "That's dramatic," Megan said quickly. "Nothing was stolen. I took out my phone. Not aggressively. Not defensively. Just calmly. $8,400, I said. In 1 week. Concert tickets. Equipment. Clothes. A festival deposit." Tyler scoffed. "I didn't take anything." Ryan jumped in before I could respond. "This is a misunderstanding. The car just declined at the gas station. We needed to get to work." I met his eyes. "That card isn't available anymore," I said. "None of them are." That's when the panic showed. Megan's grocery order had been canceled. Tyler's online purchase wouldn't process. Ryan's payment app showed a big red error message. Everything they depended on had stopped working at the same time. "You can't just do this," Ryan said. "You're humiliating us." I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't embarrass you," I said. "I protected my account." Tyler leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "So what, you're just locking us out now?" "Yes," I said. The word landed harder than I expected. Ryan stared at me like I'd broken some unspoken rule. "You could have talked to us first." I nodded slowly. "I did." No one argued that point. Megan shook her head. "You're acting like we robbed you." "You took money without asking," I said. "Money that was meant for my son's medical care. You don't get to decide that's not serious." The room buzzed with frustration. Excuses started flying. Bad timing, stress, misunderstandings, intentions that never quite made it to action. I listened. I didn't interrupt. Then I said, "I'm not unlocking anything." Ryan's voice dropped. "So what are we supposed to do?" I held his gaze. "That's not my problem anymore." The shock on their faces told me everything. They weren't angry yet. Not really. They were stunned. Because for the first time since they'd moved in, I wasn't bending. I wasn't explaining myself. I wasn't negotiating. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug and walked out of the kitchen. Behind me the house erupted. Not in shouting yet, but in disbelief. In frantic whispers. In the sound of people realizing the safety net they'd been standing on wasn't theirs to begin with. That night, I laid out rules they never expected me to enforce. That evening, I asked everyone to sit at the kitchen table. Not yelled. Not demanded. Just asked. They came in slowly, one by one, carrying the tension from the morning with them. No one spoke at first. Chairs scraped against the floor. Someone crossed their arms. Someone else stared at the table like it might give them answers. I stayed standing. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "And I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to be clear." Ryan exhaled sharply. "You already made your point." "No," I said evenly. "I made a boundary. This is the explanation." I laid everything out. Every bill. Every expense. I showed them where the money had been sitting and what it was meant for. I explained how close things already were before the card was touched. I talked about prescriptions. About insurance gaps. About the car that needed repairs I'd been postponing for months. Then I said the part one hadn't said out loud before. That money wasn't just numbers on a screen, I said. It was my son's security. No one interrupted. Megan shifted uncomfortably. Tyler rolled his eyes but didn't speak. Ryan stared at his hands. "This situation doesn't work anymore," I continued. "So this is what happens next." I held up one finger. "Rule 1. No one has access to my accounts. Not now. Not later. Not ever. Another finger. Rule 2. Everyone here works. Not looking. Not planning. Working. And contributing weekly. I don't care where and I don't care if you like it. The third finger stayed up longer. And rule 3. You have 10 days. The room went silent. 10 days for what? Ryan asked. 10 days to get employment and make arrangements to leave, I said. This is not a negotiation. Megan's face flushed. So you're just kicking us out? I'm giving you notice, I said. Which is more than I was given when my money disappeared. Tyler laughed short and sharp. You're serious? Yes. Ryan shook his head. You're humiliating us. You're making us look like failures. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't create this situation, I said. I'm just refusing to carry it anymore. No one spoke after that. There was disbelief. Then anger. Then silence again. The kind of silence that happens when people realize the ground they've been standing on is gone. I told them the rules would not change. I told them the timeline was firm. I told them this was the last conversation we would have about it. Then I sat down. The meeting ended without shouting. Without tears. Without apologies. Just shock. I went to bed that night knowing something important. Boundaries don't feel kind to people who benefit from you having none. And I gave them every chance. They wasted it. I gave them the 10 days. Every one of them. First there was noise. A lot of it. Big talk. Complaints. Dramatic phone calls where they made sure I could hear how unfair I was being. Ryan said he had interviews lined up. Megan talked about opportunities that were about to come through. Tyler scoffed and said he wasn't desperate. I didn't respond. I watched. Days passed and nothing changed. Job listings stayed open on phones untouched. Applications were half-filled and abandoned. Excuses piled up faster than effort ever did. This one doesn't pay enough. That job doesn't match my vibe. I'm not doing something beneath me. Tyler said that last one out loud, like it was a reasonable position to take while living rent-free in someone else's house. Ryan went to one job interview. He came back annoyed, not hopeful. They wanted early mornings, he said. And weekends. Megan decided the job market was toxic and said she needed time to realign. I stopped listening. Instead, I started quietly fixing what I could. I tracked down receipts, canceled orders that hadn't shipped yet, returned unopened items when possible, called companies directly and explained the situation without drama or emotion. By the end of the week, I had recovered almost $5,000. Not all of it, but enough to breathe again. That's when Tyler noticed. He stormed into the kitchen, phone in his hand, eyes sharp with accusation. You can't do that, he said. That's my stuff. I didn't look up from the counter. It was bought with my card, I said. Without my permission. He scoffed. I'll call the police. I finally met his eyes. Go ahead, I said. I'll show them the statements. The bluff collapsed instantly. He backed off, muttering under his breath, suddenly very busy with his phone. No call was made. No threats followed. That was the moment I stopped hoping. Not because I wanted to give up on them, but because they had shown me exactly who they were when consequences arrived. The 10 days ended quietly. No packed bags. No job confirmations. No plans to leave. Just the same entitlement, dressed up as exhaustion and victimhood. Ryan tried once more to talk his way out of it. We're family, he said. You don't do this to family. I nodded. Family doesn't do what you did to me. There was nothing left to discuss. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table after everyone had gone to bed. The house felt tense, like it was waiting for something to break. And I realized something hard. This house couldn't be saved. Not because of money. Not because of conflict. But because respect was gone. You can't build peace on top of entitlement. And you can't protect your child while pretending nothing is wrong. So I did the one thing they never believed I would do. I prepared to end it. I didn't yell when I gave them the notice. I printed it. One clean page. Clear language. Dates. No emotion. No explanations. Just facts. I set it on the kitchen table where everyone could see it. Ryan read it first. His face shifted from confusion to disbelief, then straight into anger. "You're serious," he said. "Yes," I replied. Megan picked it up next. Her voice wavered between outrage and panic. "You can't do this," she said. "We don't have anywhere to go." I nodded. "You've had time to plan." Tyler didn't read it at all. He laughed short and sharp like this was some kind of bluff. "This is dramatic," he said. "You'll cool off." I didn't respond. That's when the tone changed. They tried everything. Guilt came first. Stories about stress, about mental health, about how hard things had been for them lately. I listened without interrupting, the way I always had. Then came anger. Ryan accused me of betrayal. Megan said I was tearing the family apart. Tyler said I was power tripping. None of it landed, because the paper on the table didn't move. When that didn't work, they tried nostalgia. "We've been through worse," Ryan said. "We'll figure it out." I shook my head. You had chances to figure it out. The days that followed were loud. Doors slammed. Boxes were thrown together carelessly. Accusations filled the hallways. Every sound felt sharp, like the house itself was flinching. They wanted reactions. They wanted guilt. They wanted me to take it back. I stayed quiet. By the final day, the anger burned out into something else. Resignation. Keys were dropped on the counter without a word. No goodbyes. No apologies. Just silence heavy enough to press against my chest. The door closed behind them with a sound I will never forget. Not a slam. A click. I stood there longer than I needed to, listening to the quiet settle back into the house. No voices. No tension. No footsteps pacing back and forth. Just stillness. The real consequences didn't come with yelling. They came with silence. The house finally felt like mine again. Quiet. Still. Safe. I went through the bills first, paid what was overdue, scheduled the car repair, refilled Ethan's prescriptions. Each click and confirmation felt like reclaiming a piece of control I hadn't realized I'd lost. Ethan noticed it too. One Saturday morning we went to a movie. Just the two of us. I bought him popcorn without checking my balance first. He turned to me during the previews and said, "It's nice just being us again." I smiled, and for the first time in months I felt it too. Relief, yes, but also pride. The kind that comes from finally standing your ground when no one else would. I didn't hear from Ryan, Megan, or Tyler for weeks. Not because they'd changed. Because they had to face life without the safety net I'd been providing. Ryan's car got repossessed. They bounced from couches to cheap motels. Tyler finally took a part-time job at a fast food place across town. No drama. No arrests, no magical life lessons. Just reality finally demanding accountability. And me? I didn't call them. I didn't argue. I didn't gloat. I simply lived. My son and I, our quiet routines, our small joys. That was enough. Sometimes love means letting go. Not letting people walk over you, but letting them deal with the consequences of their own choices. Love without boundaries isn't kind. It's self-destruction. I learned that the hard way. Protecting yourself, protecting your child, and insisting on respect doesn't make you heartless. It makes you human. Ethan's laughter echoed through the house that night while I washed dishes in peace. For a long time I thought stability was about money, about keeping a roof over our heads. But now I know it's about boundaries, about clarity, about the quiet understanding that you can't pour from an empty cup, or risk losing everything that truly matters. I caught myself smiling at small things again. The hum of the heater, the sunlight through the windows, the sound of Ethan practicing guitar. Little moments I had let slide when chaos filled the house. They're the moments that matter most. I thought about my family, about Ryan, Megan, Tyler, and the paths they were on now. I didn't feel hatred or revenge. Just acceptance. They had made their choices and life had consequences. And for the first time I could finally focus on the life I was building for my son. Sometimes the hardest thing is the kindest thing. Standing firm, drawing the line, letting adults learn to stand on their own. It isn't easy. It isn't fun. But it works. And so here we are. Quiet, whole, safe. Ethan asleep in his own room. I can breathe again. No stolen money, no chaos, no pretending that I can fix everyone. Just a home where respect, love, and boundaries exist together. Because I learned something I hope others never have to learn the hard way. Love without boundaries isn't kindness. It's self-destruction. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is lock the door, close the app, and let people figure out how to stand on their own 2 feet. And sometimes that's exactly what you need to do for them and for you.